All right. Well, I think we are good to get started. We have 32 participants in our room, which is
Yay.
even more than last time. So I'm very excited that the word got out and a lot of different chapters. So very exciting. I am Kathleen Blake. I am the current Georgia State Secretary. I'm come from Chapter A, Atlanta in Georgia. I wanted to introduce the other, I guess they're panelists today. Erin Herring, Chapter L, Georgia, and she is the STAR Chair, as well as Kathy Von Hollen, also Chapter L. She is our ELF. She is her Chapter ELF Chair. And then Susan Myers, she is with Chapter BP, and she is currently on the Georgia International Projects Committee. So if anyone has interest in serving on a state committee, specifically the International Projects Committee, definitely reach out to Susan. And I'm also going to introduce, I can't find her face, Catherine, there she is. Catherine Brooks is currently our chair for the Georgia International Projects Committee as well. So reach out to them if you have interest in learning more about what it means to serve on the International Projects Committee or any other committees. You can reach out to myself. And I also would like to give a shout out to Sharon. She is our Georgia State president. So I appreciate her support always and any of my crazy and new ideas. So thank you so much, Sharon. I'm going to turn it over to Susan Myers briefly. Today we're going to focus on ELF and STAR. So for those of you that aren't familiar with it, or for the rest of us that always need a refresher, Susan's just kind of give us some highlights on those two projects to remind us of what those two projects are.
Okay, welcome everybody. Well, I wanted to tell you ELF. I'll tell you a little bit about ELF first. ELF was established in 1907. It's a 2% low interest loan with 3 loan amounts. $12,000 for an associate or bachelor's degree, or a technical or professional training in postgraduate certifications. There's a $15,000 loan that's for a master's degree, $20,000 for a doctoral degree. There is an 8-year payback on loans up to $15,000, a 10-year payback on loans over $15,000. Loan repayment begins 6 months after they graduate, which is a good thing. They can get their job and then start repaying the loan. Applications are processed year round, so you can submit an ELF loan application for your prospective recipient anytime during the year. Applicants must be within 6 to 24 months of graduation or course completion. And that's just a little bit on ELF. STAR was established in 2009 to provide scholarships for exceptional high school senior women. It is for them to attend a post-secondary, an accredited post-secondary school within the United States and Canada. Submission window for applications is August 15th through October 15th, and the deadline would be at probably 11:59 p.m. on the 15th. There have been 5,214 STAR recipients, and they have received a total of $13,035,000. That's amazing, isn't it? In that short time frame since STAR began. Awards are posted always by April 30th of each year. So if you had a recipient this year and you hadn't heard yet, it'll be coming by April 30th, and you'll know if your recipient got the STAR award. That's a little bit about STAR, and I'll turn it back over to Kathleen.
Great. And where can all of that information be found, Susan?
It can all be found on the international or Georgia website.
Yes, all that information can be found there. So if you didn't catch one of those, definitely follow up there. I want to bring it over to Kathy and Erin. Erin and Kathy, if you could we'll start with Erin. Give us a little bit about your PEO background so we know where you come from, who introduced you to PEO, maybe when you were initiated, if you've been in multiple chapters, or how long you've been in Chapter L, and then maybe some of the committees that you've held within the chapter. That was a lot of questions.
It was. Okay, this isn't like the oath of office or anything. I don't have to repeat after me, but
No.
I joined PEO in 2011 in Cincinnati. I happened to be living in Cincinnati at that particular time after returning. My husband and I had spent 8 years in Europe. And so I joined in 2011. I promptly moved 6 months later to a place I only lived for 12 months. So I didn't join a chapter where I lived at the time in Charlotte. I was there 12 months almost to the day, where I moved to Tulsa. I joined Chapter FE in Tulsa, had a great 4 years there, was pretty active, did a bunch of different things between membership and kind of hospitality. I think I was a communications chair, maybe. And I moved to Savannah in 2017, joined Chapter L, and I believe I became the Georgia State Scholarship and Star Scholarship Chair about 2 years ago. And really the reason I fell into it was because I, at the time, had a high schooler. I had boys, but I was deeply involved in high school communication and said, I'm already in that field. And so it's nothing for me to reach out, not just to the high school where I'm zoned, but I actually reached out to 4 or 5 different high schools in the Savannah area. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Kathy, you give us a little bit of background on you.
Well, I joined Chapter L in 2014. I had 3 different clients who were members of L for a very long time. They had differing opinions on whether or not it was to my benefit to be a part of their chapter. They were going through a really hard time. I'm watching Ann laugh, and I'm going to talk about her in a minute. So L had aged. And they had gotten a little tired and they weren't sure if they really wanted to continue on. And so Aletha Dunleavy, who is really, I guess, the person I'm going to give the most credit to, but certainly Susan Corbin and another customer as well, Marty. Anyway, they just decided that they were going to hang on and they were going to keep their chapter alive. And they were not willing to invite myself or the person that was initiated with me, Jan, until they got proper footing. And Chapter AS decided to mentor us and to help us reinvigorate, if you will, the chapter. So it was really a fun time to come in because, you know, boots on the ground, there was no question we were there to help. And so from the very beginning, I feel like Jan and I have tried hard. She has a different skill set than I. She came in communications, technology. I had a financial planning background, so I was more about money. So I ended up on ways and means and budget and things like that. So we kind of, you know, had different skills and managed to do everything we could to help the chapter. So I have done ways and means, I've done budget, I've done ELF, I've done project chair, and now I've moved to membership, and I think I'm on the nominating committee this year, and always fundraising. So, you know, we're a small chapter and we're still having issues with staying vibrant.
Well, they're definitely lucky to have the both of you right now. I'm going to start with Erin. So we're going to focus on STAR. I know you and I've chatted before, so I've kind of gotten understand your story. Tell us how you first got involved with STAR. Was it something you volunteered for, or were you voluntold? And then what I really liked about your story was your method of finding a candidate had really evolved over time. You had kind of started a little bit bigger, and now you've kind of narrowed it down. So can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. I actually, I was asked to join the projects committee, and in that I think Kathy and I talked about, and I said, let me do high school students because I had a high schooler, and so it made a lot of sense. But what I did was the first year, we had just won our first star a couple of years ago, and so I reached out to the lady who won. Her mom is actually a counselor at Effingham County High School. So I reached out to her. I reached out to the high school where my son went, and I reached out to 3 other high schools. So for a total of 5 by email in Savannah. And I just said, I introduced P.E.O. I talked about what our scholarships offered for high school women, and asked for candidates. I just flat out said, I'm looking for people to give money to. So work with me. And only 2 replied. And that's okay, because what we have done is now we ask for each year, I send a note to the one at Richmond Hill High School and the one at Effingham County High School. And I say, I need somewhere between 2 and 4 candidates. Every high school has 2 to 4 women who would be outstanding candidates on paper and in person. When I asked for 2 to 4 in the last 2 years, I've gotten 4 from each, and that has allowed us to choose, and that allows us to flesh out the best candidate, not just on paper, although in a lot of ways that's what we look for. But also I spend a tremendous amount of time. I interview these girls in a kind of a Zoom thing around February or March, just to make sure they really do meet the letter of the law. And then I spend time over the summer finding time. Even last summer in the middle of COVID, we met outside at parks, outside at Starbucks. I met outside in outside a church, just to meet them, because as y'all well know, sometimes you can't suss out details in a phone conversation. Sometimes the conversation you have face to face is a real differentiator in the information you get. And I talk to the girls a lot about, my job is to sell them, and that they are more than their GPA. And I want them to tell me something that gives them a story. And because a story resonates not just with the committee, but it carries, it makes people remember, oh, that was the candidate that started the military tutoring club. And she'd only been in Richmond Hill for 6 months when that happened. Those are the kind of things that sometimes when they read on paper, you're like, I wonder how that connects. But in conversation, it makes a big difference, and you can really find out a lot.
So you started by contacting the high schools in your area, which was about 5. Of those, really only 2 reached back out to you. Who did you target when you emailed them? Was the counseling office or the counselor of the school, or how are the schools made up?
Well, it depends. I reached out to the counseling office at every high school except Richmond Hill. I only knew that at Richmond Hill High School, which is like a 6A high school in the area, they have a scholarship chair. That is unusual, and I recognize that. So normally you would go through the counseling office, but in this particular case, I had met her separately and knew that her job was to create a list of scholarships in an Excel spreadsheet for the seniors or for junior candidates going into their senior year to reference and see if they qualify for any of them. And then it's up to the kids typically to reach out to the counseling office. So she is not a counselor, but she is the scholarship chair. So
these are the 2 schools that you now focus on, because that's, plenty of well-deserving women within 2 high schools, instead of, I feel like we have to go to every single high school around town or all of these things. And you've really narrowed it down and have been successful at that. And then the other piece that I really take away from that is, like you said, it's not necessarily just about their what's on paper, that you really spend the time to have these conversations with them, to be able to speak for them, tell stories about them, I also love that because a lot of times the thing that makes some of these women the most dynamic women and most deserving can't always be captured in something on a piece of paper. You know, maybe they didn't have the means to do some of the things that some of the other women did. And it sounds like the STAR Scholarship really is built to find those women, and you figured out how to find them.
And the nice part is I feel like, but the time that I've spent on it, we usually end up with more than one that could be a star. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of depends on how the story fleshes out in the interviews, how we end up choosing just one.
And and just a reminder for everyone, you can only have one star submission per chapter. So if you do come across, you know, a couple, I know of other chapters that will reach out to another chapter in the area and say, no, we really have two incredibly dynamic women. And the other piece that I think makes you incredibly successful is you find multiple candidates that are, you know, well deserving, but then you narrow it down to the best one. Have you come across ever that you feel like there were two that were really winners, or you've really, out of the few that you interview, you really find out that there's one?
Actually, this last year I struggled because I really had two, and I actually had one from each school. That doesn't always happen that way, but in the end, sometimes it's just hard. And the nice part about STAR, I know we're not talking about Georgia Scholarship, but it does play in. When I interview these girls, I'm like, first off, Georgia Scholarship is open to all of y'all. So whether or not you are my STAR candidate or not, we're gonna put your name forward for Georgia Scholarship. And that one's renewable, or you can reapply each year. And STAR is not. And so for some of them, that is actually more dollars, you know. And so I try really hard to encourage them, and each girl at the end of the conversation, a lot of the conversation ends up, I'm like, you are so much more than your resume and that your your GPA. And I want you to know that you have a lot there. And I also talk about what PEO can offer if they don't do the traditional route and go straight through in 4 years, and, you know, because life happens, COVID happens, and they need to know that as an organization, we support them no matter how their journey looks like educationally.
And that's the part I love about PEO is, you know, there's the financial support, but then there's this other support that comes with the scholarship or not, that a lot of scholarships wouldn't offer. So my biggest takeaway in talking with you is that you've narrowed your sources of these students, but you've opened up the amount of students that you actually talk to. And I think that seems to be the biggest key in your success. A lot of people will, you know, contact all the high schools looking for one student, and you essentially are contacting two high schools trying to find maybe 4 or 5 students. And it kind of seems like that flip in numbers that you've identified seems to be successful. And I think that's something that other chapters would really be able to take away. And
well, I think it's very hard to manage multiple high schools. Like if I was actually managing 5 high schools, I'd probably lose my mind because that's a lot. But with 2 of them, I've developed a relationship. And again, I can play off the fact that I am looking for a STAR candidate, but really I am building my Georgia Scholarship candidates. And from that, because my STAR also applies for Georgia Scholarship. And so I really tout the fact that we do have a lot to offer. Even if you're not chosen as our 1-star candidate, you are going, you know, typically, I have never turned a girl down. And actually this year, we submitted 9 Georgia Scholarship, 1-star, and 1 girl, I had 10, and she failed to get her transcript in on time, which, despite all the work. But, you know, I think if you're only looking for one, it's very hard, even for a high school counselor, to pick one. But if you say, can you give me 2, 3, 4, 5, then let me suss it out. Let me do the interviews and let me talk to people, because if my job's to sell somebody on paper, then I want more options than just one.
Absolutely. So and you've kind of given the advice, but if there's someone on here who has been told by their chapter, you're now the STAR chair, and maybe they're a brand new PEO, and maybe they have never had a STAR award recipient before, and they're kind of sitting there thinking, okay, I have this new title of STAR chair, and I read what the STAR is, but I have no idea where to start. Obviously, they can take your kind of take your path, but what's just your initial, I guess, encouragement or advice to them on how to get started?
Honestly, there's way more than 5 high schools in the Savannah area. I just picked 5 random, which I felt might reply. But if you're living in an area where you feel like, you can reach out and have a conversation, or like, I never went up to the high schools. Well, that's a lie. I went to Richmond Hill because that's where my kid went. But I've never been to Effingham County High School. And but I want to help these girls, and I tell the PEO story and how we really try to empower women through supporting their educational goals. I'm not looking for this to be a one-off. I'm truly looking for a relationship. And if you're willing to give me, sometimes it might be 2, because it depends on the size of the school. If you have a really small school, you might only have 2, but 2 is better than 0. And if you have 1, 2 schools that you can really pull from, I would just put yourself out there and say, hi, I'm the local STAR chair. This is what this means. PEO supports women by empowering them in their educational journeys. And in this case, we're looking for high school juniors who are rising seniors who are looking at going to colleges at accredited universities. And I would love for you to share with me the names. And if you'd like to talk to me first, then I'm happy to do that. And in both cases, I did chat with the counselors, and we talked about what they were looking for. And pre-COVID, I went to school and met with them. And post-COVID, we've done all that by Zoom. And then I meet individually with the girls over the summer. So that's work for me. But I think it makes a huge difference in the detail behind the application.
You just said you're not just looking for candidates, but you're truly looking for a relationship with them. And I really feel like that's what sets the PEO scholarships apart from a lot of the others, which is really beneficial. And there are resources on the international website. There are, one-sheeters, there are PDFs, there's handouts. I also, in talking to the both of you, I know you've also created your own kind of content and write-ups to be able to send out. So if someone wants to reach out to you for those, there is information to send. And there's information to print out or to order from international to drop off. However, I do feel these days with we're dealing with 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds at this point, and most of them are probably going to want something sent over digitally. That's just the age that they're living in.
But I ask for their resume, because a lot of times it forces them to create a resume, but it also gives me talking points when I'm having a conversation with them. For example, I see that you are a member of the Forest City Gun Club. What does that mean? I mean, a 17-year-old girl, a member of a Forest City Gun Club. I didn't know what that meant. Turns out she is a national champion skeet shooter. Those are the kind of things you couldn't ask for. And that's what the power, I think, behind PEO scholarships. And if I was saying to somebody who is new in it, so you're not looking for one, you can choose one out of 3 or 5 candidates, even if you're only going to one high school. If you ask for 5 candidates from one high school, it doesn't have to be a relationship where it's your granddaughter or the niece of your blah, blah, blah. I think there's a lot of power in our chapter because it's not somebody who's related. And so we all buy in to their success in a way that we want them all to succeed. And if we don't, it doesn't feel so personal because it's not one of our own.
Yeah. And we did have one question come in. Has there ever been a time that you've identified 2 strong candidates that you wanted to move forward with to where you would share that with another chapter? Or have you not really, there's always been one candidate that's stronger so far?
I actually didn't know. Is this wrong for me to say? I didn't know I should share
my
good candidates. I didn't know I should share my star candidate. No, I didn't know. So
I feel like honestly, finding 2-star candidates is really hard. So it doesn't happen often, but I mean, and I feel like you usually do find the one that you have identified as the star candidate. But in the scenario that you find 2 that you really feel are deserving, then yeah, reach out to your other Savannah chapter, or I don't know, maybe you could come up
I'll
with
do
a,
that. I just didn't know I could. I guess I didn't ask that question, or I didn't know to ask that question, but I'd be happy to,
yeah.
if and when that situation presents itself. I have had 2 really strong candidates last year, but one presented better on paper. And just when it came down to how you talk about somebody,
Mhm.
like I said, it's about the story that they create on paper, and less so about just their GPA. Because I've had some really excellent candidates that only do well in school and really don't do anything else. And
Yeah.
that is not a star level candidate. So
It is very hard to find 2. So that's kind of, I would think that that's kind of rare. And once you've gotten down to the 2, the one that you feel strongest about, is probably the recipient there. Well, thank you. I'm not saying I won't come back to you and think of other questions.
okay, sure.
Because I might. I am going to. I'm gonna ask Kathy here. I'm switching your videos for the recording. Let's see. Kathy, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So there's first I'd like to just talk ELF, and then I'm going to ask you a couple project chair questions later. But in talking to you before, your story is also I feel like it's kind of similar to Erin's in that you started really broad with this great idea that was broad and overarching in order to find the most candidates. And in turn, you ended up making it a much smaller niche specific, of which allowed you to identify more candidates. And I kind of see that theme between both Erin's story and yours. So can you kind of talk us through how you first started looking for candidates and where you are now?
Well, I think the minute I came into Chapter L, my focus was always on the educational end, the helping ladies find these grants and loans and scholarships. So that said, early on, I saw the value of ELF. I'm a financial planner. I was like, are you kidding me? A 2% loan paid back over 10 years, simple interest, no load fees up front, or I thought it was wonderful. My niece was getting ready to go get her master's degree, and we needed money. And I said, oh, you can be our first prospect. We had never had any type of project awardees in Chapter L, to my knowledge, before that. So she was the first. The next year, our president in 2016, Kim, her niece was getting ready to go for undergraduate, and we got her a loan. And then in 2017, so here we are, we're just doing the typical PEO thing. If it comes our way, we take it, but we're not going out trying to find candidates so much. In 2017, we had this lovely speaker come from Memorial Hospital, and it was a luncheon. And when it was all over, I thought, she's right in the middle of all these women. How can I ask her to help me find people for some of these awards? And so I went up and talked to her, and she said, you know what? My assistant wants to go back to medical school, and she needs money. She has a lovely family, her father, her sister. The sister went back and got her RN, while the young woman that I was talking with, Stella, continued to work, and her dad worked. And then Stella got to go back to college while her sister and the father worked. So it was really kind of a really supportive thing. They all lived together. So 15, 16, 17, we got one candidate. Well, by 18, I was like excited about this. I was going to try to figure out a way to make some inroads in our local college, Armstrong. And so I had a friend who was the director of donor relations. And I said, will you put a group together for me? I want to talk about PEO and all these great things that we do. And she said, okay. So I want to read you guys this. In this meeting, there was me, the VP of donor relations, the department chair of the health sciences division, the VP of Student Affairs, 2 gals from the Directors of Financial Aid, and some coordinator who was going to put everybody together from Savannah graduates, Savannah State, Armstrong, Savannah Tech. So, I mean, I had this conference table full of these people, and it was the elephant. And I've got my little brochures, and I'm trying to talk about all 6 of the different projects. And anyway, my husband said, you know, you might be the dog that caught the bus, but it didn't work out that way because it was too much. I didn't have enough focus. I didn't have the niche, as we've been talking about. But there was one person, the Department of the Health Sciences, the dean, that saw the value of PEO, and she and I kept communicating. There's a lot of loans that are available to college students through banks, but PEO is not that. We're different. So there was just no way to sort of fit into their normal process. So anyway, she and I were talking, and finally she said, you know, we have a student group for the Department of Physical Therapy. That happened to be her thing. And she said, why don't you come and talk to them? They have a meeting, and we'll get the guys to leave, and you can talk to all the gals. And so I got my first referral out of that in 18, and the next year in 19, I got 6. So all of a sudden I had cracked open something where these ladies are spending $30,000 a year over 3 years to get their doctoral degree. They need money, there's no question. In Erin's case, she's looking for merit-based. In my case, I'm looking for need-based. And you don't have to have a great story. You just need to have a great grade point. You need to have 2 co-signers, and you need to have good credit. But through all of that, I found these women to be just young women, to be so lovely. They work really, really hard. Most of them can't have a second job because they're in school 8 hours a day for 4 days a week. So anyway, I have found a niche there. And there's the diagnostics as well. And lately we've been working a little bit towards trying to find our way with the program for continuing education to the nursing department. So that's kind of been the process. Last year was tough. In 2020, we had 2 early on our presidents on this call. So I want to shout out to Charlene. She literally had to get on the phone because we didn't hardly even know what Zoom was, and call around to all the members of Chapter L and get them to support my 2 candidates in like February or March of 20. Then we had one later in 20. Then we've had 2 in 21 this year. And every one of those has just been introduced to the chapter, but it's been because of Charlene's efforts. And so anyway, that's one of the most important things I can also say, is that we've had a lot of support from the leadership. The projects are important in our chapter.
Absolutely. And do you have, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have numbers, do you have maybe how many ELF candidates you've submitted, or how many were successful?
I have a spreadsheet, my dear.
I was going to say, I want to brag on you.
Yeah.
I am a financial planner. I have a spreadsheet. I know how many errands done. I know how many PCEs. I know it all. But for ELF, we have submitted 20, I would say.
Okay.
That's the best guess. We have 2 pending right now. We've had 13 approved. We've never not had one approved, but we've lost them once I did the chapter recommendation and they did their application, because they ended up not having the co-signers. That little co-signer piece is really challenging. And it's like the people that need the money the most are most likely not to have the co-signer. And that kind of breaks your heart. But that said, we've never had one turned down. And we've lost them for co-signers. And one time had a lovely young woman, she's a little professional golfer and working on her physical therapy degree. But her dad, she's from England. So she came over here and her dad was going to co-sign the loan. And I didn't realize, because I was new. And that's what happens when you get some experience under your belt, that you had to be a US citizen to co-sign the note. So we lost her. And I was sorry about that because she should have won it. And we had one also that was in the hopper, and then she got awarded the graduate assistant space. So they paid her tuition. But basically, if they do the paperwork, if they have the co-signers, they're going to be accepted. And we're working on $20,000 doctoral. In a lot of cases, we've had $221,000 in loans approved through
For your
in
chapter.
the last 5 years.
That's fantastic. And I can also imagine of those 13 to 15 women that a few of them might make exceptional PEOs and may be interested in joining your chapter. I know ELF is usually a little bit more on the forefront of thinking about membership than STAR, since they are kind of they're still in high school or in college and young.
With the exception of the fact that we have 3-hour meetings that are on Thursday in the middle of the day. So forget that.
So we're going to start a Savannah Night chapter. I already told you. The other thing that I find really interesting about Chapter L that I have picked up is that you have a project chair. And now not every chapter has a project chair. Every chapter will have a chair for each of the projects, or maybe they take on 2 projects. So if you could kind of give us the history on the project chair in your chapter, and maybe what's worked, what hasn't, and how it's evolved over time, and what benefits you see in it.
Well, I think the project chair is the most important person. And that if you don't have a project chair, you're probably not going to have great success. Somebody has to be, someone has to organize. And a lot of times what we did before we kind of got our stuff together was, you're putting your yearbook together, and there's a blank spot next to each one of the projects, and you just sort of put somebody's name on it. So we call them place cards. And that doesn't really mean that they've committed to it, that they really want to do it. We have someone now who's on the PCE chair whose daughter was awarded one in 2016 when she went back to get her master's in education. Our current project chair got an ELF loan as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. So I think that you really have to have people that have passion for it. Otherwise, I would just not even put anybody, just don't even put anybody's name there. Just concentrate on where you have energy. Erin came in 2018, and at that point, I was the project chair. And we had a meeting, we got together, I asked everybody to bring a brief that kind of spoke about what their project was. And then also we wanted to brainstorm about where do we find these people. So Erin immediately came up with her 2. The other people had a couple of different things. We had somebody that was really good with the IPS. And it was just a lot of energy in the room. And then further, I just want to add, I invited our president, our treasurer, and our secretary. I said, we just need this to be a core value of Chapter L. It has to be an important part of who we are, finding women that, will qualify for these grants, loans, scholarships. And it's been really supported greatly. And another offshoot of that, if I may, because I get so excited about everything, it's really made a huge difference in fundraising. Because when you keep saying, we just put $122,000 worth of grants, loans, and scholarships into the community through our work on projects, and now we need to give something back to international because we keep drawing down. I think that that's really been a good motivator also to get people to involved.
Yeah, you just said so many great things. The fundraising part, when you hear from a project speaker, or you meet someone who's directly benefiting from what we do, it makes the fundraising just that much more important, and more tangible and real of where that money is going. And I kind of like that you said, just getting a project chair, getting the energy going. A lot of times that's really what some chapters need, is just some enthusiasm and encouragement, and there's people willing to want to jump in and do that. So for someone, I'll ask you the same question I asked Erin. For someone who's new to the ELF chair, first time working on ELF, no idea where to start, what are the first steps that you would recommend for her? What's your I guess piece of advice if tomorrow they decide they're the ELF chair and they don't know what to do next?
I think that any of the chairs, and I will just begin with this, is that we're talking for the most part to young people. They use technology. We have got to be organized. We have to be able to deal with them through text or email. So I think you have to sort of set a goal, but then start a process right away for keeping track of them, for getting the information. I hate to type. I'm the worst at it. But when it comes to something like this, you can get more than a paragraph out of me, because I know that's the attention span that I have when I first respond to someone who asks for information, and I'm sending them out, the guidelines for a PEO loan. And, there's just a lot of paper. And I think that you really need to get organized. And then I think that you need to think about your community. What do you have? We have Georgia State here. Savannah State. We have Armstrong, now Georgia Southern. We have a technical college. We have 5, 6 different places. Just target somebody. And the other thing is, what's interesting is, I'm not sure if the chapter is on here, but when I was working with health sciences at Georgia Southern, they referred me to someone who is English science. I was trying to find a way to use my relationships with them to find a scholar candidate. And I thought, where's the doctoral? And I thought, everyone that ever gets a scholar award is a rocket scientist. So, where's science and math? And so I got referred to a woman who ends up being a member of one of our chapters in Savannah.
That's awesome.
So, you got to look around your own chapter and say, who can help us? What do we have here? And, a center of influence is always key. So I would find someone that can help you get a plan, get organized, and then just keep trying. It took me a long time.
Well, before I open up to questions and answers, I'm gonna unpin you right now. All right. Well, I just wanted to sing praises to Kathy and Erin, because I think what's obvious here is that we have 2 sisters who didn't have a whole lot of direction, and no one said go do this or go do that. They were incredibly creative, incredibly persistent when they would hit dead ends, took initiative and went out there and tried new things. And that's incredibly highly commendable. And I think that's why you've been so successful. Georgia is incredibly lucky to have you, and especially Chapter L, considering everything you all have been through. So I appreciate your efforts on all of this, and everything you've done. And I'm just so glad to be able to share it with other chapters right now, so that they can learn from you. And I will say, if you have questions, you can reach out to Erin and Kathy directly. I'd be happy to share their email with you as well. But right now, I did want to open up if there are any questions, and you can either type it in the chat. We got a Chapter L. You are awesome. Shout out.
I think so too.
Thanks, guys.
Or you can raise your hand, and I'll call on you if anyone has any questions. I saw Mary Lee first. You want to unmute yourself and we can hear you?
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah.
I'm the one from Missouri.
Yeah.
And my question is for Erin. We have our chapter has had somewhat success with both of these projects. My question with our last star candidate, she was very, after our initial meeting with her to kind of vent her resume, so to speak, we thought she was a shoo-in for she was doing so many wonderful things in school, out of school. We're very impressive. I wondered, somewhere she fell through the cracks and was not selected. We did not. I wondered how much contact you have with the girls when the actual process and writing their essay, do you review that with them? Or once you've met them and found their story, as you put it, do you kind of turn them loose on their own?
The ones that I've written, I do not review their application at all.
Okay.
We talk extensively, and I am always available, like Kathy said, by text, because these girls are very tech savvy, and I have had complaints about the application process being clunky. But as a general comment, I have had, when they're filling out their application, usually I get 2 or 3 texts like, what does this mean? What are they looking for here? And I do counsel them that they are more than their GPA and what they've done in school. And their successful application is going to be talking more about what you do as a person than what you did in Beta Club.
Right.
For example. And so I do not review their application. In fact, I don't even have access to their application because of the way it works.
Right. I knew that you didn't have access. I just wondered if the girls voluntarily shared before they actually submitted it. That was really kind of what I was wondering. I'm a retired high school math teacher, so I do have access to counselors in the high school. And I just wanted to say, thank you so much for sharing. You've given me some ideas that I hope I can take to our local school population.
Well, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. I grew up in my dad was a university administrator and a university professor. So education has been in my blood forever, and currently have boys in college. And so I'm still living that dream. If I can say it's a dream, I'm not sure. But I absolutely make myself available to the STAR candidates and say, if you have questions, if you want me to review, you let me know. But you need to know I don't have access to what you submit at all. Right. So, please understand, I'd love to be able to read it and give you feedback, but the way it works, I cannot. But I can talk to you about it during the process.
Okay.
Kathleen, it's Charlene. I joined in 2016. The following year, we had we had a girl from Effingham County High School, and I followed up with her, and I was kind of the star person, and she did win the scholarship. I think that one thing that what I would like to emphasize is the recommendation from the person, from me. Your recommendation for that child, for that young woman, is very important. So we met. We didn't get a chance to meet face to face. We did a lot of it through emails and telephone. Her mother happened to be the counselor at Effingham County High School, so she and her mother were very much working on this together. But I think that once your chapter has been successful in getting that STAR scholarship, because my mother is in a chapter in Florida, and they thought that this girl was going to get it just going to get it, and she didn't. It's very competitive. So I think that being new to PEO at that time and having a success in having a student actually get it and go and deliver it to her on awards night, recognition, gives your chapter a real impetus to follow through the next year and the next year. And it is. And I'm proud of Erin and Kathy for their work that they do with projects. And I was talking to Kathy this morning, in fact, and to me, the heart of your chapter is your projects, because we're in it for education and we're in it for the sisterhood, but it's real important that your projects chair and the people be totally committed. And I'm very proud of these two women and to be their sisters. I'm finished.
I know that they appreciate your support. It definitely seems like an amazing chapter. I can't wait to come visit you guys sometime. Are there any other? Let me see if there's anyone else with questions. Anyone else? Don't want to skip anyone. Great. Dee?
Now, I've heard a couple of you say, and we certainly have had that experience where we had a young woman that we thought was outstanding. Our chapter is also a Savannah chapter. She was from St. Vincent's, which is a private school. The St. Vincent's, about 4 years prior to that, had given us a name, and that candidate did win the Star Scholarship. We were so convinced that this young gal that we had was just everything that she needed to be. And by golly, she was not accepted. But I will tell you, and I wanted to know if any of the other chapters had considered this. We were so disappointed as a chapter that we decided that we would give her something on behalf of the chapter. And we took some of our chapter funds. We had a luncheon for her, I wouldn't call it a luncheon, a little reception. Her parents came and it was at a home. And we had our little speeches ready, and she was not expecting this. And we presented her with a $500 check. And it really, it made us feel good because we wanted her to know we were behind her. She was just so appreciative. She actually came back and spoke after her first year. She came back to the chapter during the summertime and spoke to the chapter about the things that she had been doing during the year. So I just passed that on. I didn't know if anybody else did that.
BP has done that.
Yes, and Susan, when Susan was president, we followed up. We have a program called Dollars for Scholars. And so if we nominate somebody for like the Georgia State scholarship and they don't get it, we do provide funds to the girl. And we as chapter members write notes to them. We had a schedule set up that each month the girls would hear from one chapter member. And I think that emotional support was just as valuable, if not more so, than the dollar amount.
Yeah, I think so as well. Those girls are like my granddaughters.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny, at almost midnight on New Year's Eve, little Jenny Morris, Pat, texts me to tell me Happy New Year.
Oh.
I would be amiss as a state officer if I didn't remind everyone to make sure that we are giving within the pyramid, though. And if you have a question about the pyramid and the pyramid of giving, reach out and I'd be happy to pass that along to you.
And we're very cognizant of that.
Yeah.
With Sue Hausman in our chapter, we are.
She won't let you get away with it.
Kathleen, it is okay for chapters to do something on their local level.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, the priorities are the international, but it's perfectly acceptable for chapters to set aside some funds, and it's wonderful, and you never know where that may lead.
Yep.
That you give them something, and it makes them very pleased that they have even put their faith in you. So I think that's great. It is okay.
Yeah, the financial support, as well as like we have said, the relational side of things, that it just really doesn't come with any other organization that I've seen except PEO, which makes us stand out from all the other scholarships. So I don't want to take up any more time. Again, thank you, Kathy and Erin, so much. I think this is just incredibly valuable information that we will all be able to go back to our chapters with. And it's not just sitting in chapter L. I absolutely love sharing it across chapters and across states in this scenario. And then definitely thanks to Sharon and to Catherine and Susan for always supporting this. And And another thank you to Susan for introducing me to Kathy and Erin, because she was the one that raised her hand and said, hey, I think there's some really great information that we can share here. So thank you guys all again, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you for having us.